what we usually do is we usually start with a brief Dhamma discussion. You call it Dhamma. Dhamma basically means the nature. So we are talking about nature. We are not talking about something supernatural, which is very human, which is very natural. Okay. So in that note, we were discussing about reality, knowledge, inquisition, and mindfulness, how they are all connected. Some of you came for the first time, so don't worry about all that. It doesn't have to be confusing. And some of you here as well. But last time I also described two words, karma and karma guna. Karma means in Pali language or in Sanskrit language, the sensual pleasures. And then the karma guna means the ingredients or the constituents of sensual pleasure. So those are two different things. That's what I mentioned. But let's look at it from a fresh perspective. Now, we in the world, people go through a lot of mental, ups and downs, right? So I'm sure that you have heard me saying that if someone is fixated on what has happened yesterday or day before or last week, and you are overthinking about it, it's called depression. And if you're thinking about what might happen tomorrow or after this session or next year, that's called anxiety, right? So those two are two extremes of our mental status. But let me tell you that all of you are also bipolar. You know what bipolar disorder is? It's just anyone think today there were ups and downs today, right? Sometimes we have a very monotonous, very neutral, nothing special days, but usually we have ups and downs within a day. We have ups and downs within a week. If you look at the last month, last year, like so far, this is month of May, and for the last 5 months, so 4.5 months, there were ups, there were downs. And there's a wonderful book called DSM-5, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which says whether you are clinically up or down, and if you are passing a certain point, then you are clinically manic or clinically depressed. But any one of us, we are in a continuous battle between those two states, or we are in a continuous oscillation. We go up, we go down, like a oscillating clock, pendulum, right? So like that, our mental states go up and down. And this up and down is, or the emotions are based on our reality. Basically, we respond to our reality usually, right? Based on the reality we find, our emotions go up and down like a pendulum, it oscillates. Now, this reality is based on what we perceive. Is that right? Based on our perception. And what is perception? We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we touch. 5 senses. So these 5 senses or 5 perceptions gives us the reality. That reality decides whether we want to be up or down, right? So that's very simple. But what we are going to do is, we are not going to accept that, we are going to inquire that. Remember from the rabbit story last time, we learned that the Buddhist way is inquiring. And the way we are going to inquire is, we are going to use a very sharp blade, like an obsidian knife. You know, the material obsidian, it's like Neanderthals used it, all the ancestral Homo sapiens, they used it. You can make flake, trim it and make a very sharp-edged blade. It's very sharp. It's one of the finest blades in the world. So with this obsidian knife called mindfulness, we are going to slice this reality. We are going to slice it where the reality starts and the fantasy ends. So we are going to find that fine slice, right? Now, how do we do that? Before we slice our perception, especially, I'm going to do it in 2 ways. One way is the internal and external way. Now, what do I mean by that? You have your eye, ear, etc., the 5 senses, right? Now, am I part of you, or am I something external to you? Now, you can see me with your eyes. My image, is it yours, or is it something external to you? Wendy is external to us. I am not Wendy. I am Ananda, right? And she's there. By Wendy, I mean the image I see is not really mine, But the eye is mine, the equipment is mine, right? But the image is not mine. This sound is not yours, it's my sound, and you are listening to that. So the process of listening, the equipment that you listen with, it's yours, but the sound is mine. Okay, what I mean by that is that when we look into our perceptions, what we perceive as reality, we can see that there's a demarcation between external stuff and internal stuff. Now, what you would think or what your thought chain would be after listening to this, that's yours, that's not mine, that's internal. But this sound, this sight, or the sight of the lake, sight of other people, that's not yours, it's external. And you have an internal part, that's your afterthought. How you interpret that, that's internal, right? So now identifying which is which is what the mindfulness does. So we are going to very clearly find the demarcation between what is external and what is internal. And during the next few minutes of our meditation, try to see if you can divide the external part and the internal part. What belongs to the outside and what is mine. Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it, to even give an example how it works, can you remember the first time you owned a car, your first vehicle? I remember my first vehicle, it was a Ford Laser. So I was very excited. Right after university I bought it, and I was so excited I put neon lights underneath, I put racing pedals, made it really fancy, sound system. But after like 8 months, 1 year, I got bored with it. It wasn't giving me that happiness, that joy of racing or riding it. It didn't give me that. Now, when I was trying to sell it after 1 year, the car absolutely did not change. It was in the still same mint condition. I took it. Seats were fine. There were no stains. All good. Same condition. But I changed. Externally, the car did not change, but the happiness I received from looking at that, it changed. Now, you need to really go back to time when you really own something that you've been yearning for the first time, right? When you have that, it makes you so happy. But few months down the line, few years down the line, eventually that kick is going to go away, right? And you want to give it to someone else. And that next person is very happy now, right? Same goes to husbands and wives also. In the beginning, you really love her, infatuated or him, and then after some time you want to give it to someone else. It could happen, right? So physically, probably a little change, but usually even without a lot of physical or external change, you change. So there's an internal part to it. And then let's take another example. We have earworms. Sometimes there are catchy music which stays on and we keep repeating on it. But after some time we switch to something else, right? So the music, the sound did not change, but something in me changed, so that the happiness I receive or the emotions I have changed. Let's go back to the beginning again. Our bipolar nature, depression, anxiety, whatever the emotions we have are based on the reality. The reality is based on the perception, right? Perception is basically the sound, sight, smell, touch, etc. Now they don't change, but our emotions change. So then that is where we need to fundamentally inquire, is our reality the correct reality or is it a fantasy, right? So that's what we are going to do. But before we go there, again through meditation or mindfulness rather, there's another aspect to it. The other aspect is that back in the day, I had two friends. I'm making up this story. So my two friends, one was blind, like really blind. The other one was crippled. He was paralyzed from waist down. And one day they wanted to go somewhere. And the blind guy said, well, I'm blind, but my limbs are working, so you get on my back and I'll carry you. And the crippled guy is now telling the directions. You go this way, you go that way. So when they were walking on a road, they came to a a place where there was a puddle of mud. There was an area that there was really muddy, and they were walking barefoot. And then the blind guy says, or the crippled guy says, my friend, you need to be careful. There's some water and mud, could be very slippery, so walk cautiously. So then the blind guy came to the point where he could feel the mud, and he said, well, I feel the mud. I feel the slipperiness, I feel the wet, cold texture of the mud. He said that. And the blind guy said, yes, you are on top of it, I can see that. Now, this is again a parable, right? If we take the same thing into our perceptions, the images you see, can you touch them through your eye? Can you touch the images? Have you ever touched the images? Have you ever touched the sounds? Have you ever seen the sounds? But when we receive the reality, these things are integrated. It's called sensory integration. In fact, if you look at a little infant, their senses are not integrated. So they are trying to catch something, but their hand-eye coordination is not integrated that way. And if you notice a little kid, right, like an infant, you go close to him and do peekaboo, but he doesn't know where the sound is coming from. He's perplexed and he's looking up and down, and he would look at someone else, right? He doesn't know where the sound is coming from. But when I do this, you have spatial awareness. You would look at where the sound is coming from. So in a way, you connect the touch, physical, with the sound, the space, and you connect the eyes with the touch, etc. Now, again, go back to yourself. Aren't you like a crippled guy who can't walk? He can see, and the guy who can touch, he can't see, and the guy who can see can't touch. To demonstrate that, let's close our eyes for a bit, and then let's try to touch our leg. We don't see our leg, but we can touch our leg. Let's try to disintegrate this. We do not see color, we do not see shape. We have a sensation on our fingertips. Now let's open our eyes and then look at where you were touching. Our eyes can't feel sound, our eyes can't feel sensation of touch, smell, aroma, taste. It can only see. Did that make any sense? So we need this really sharp blade now to again disintegrate on that angle. So we are going to disintegrate in terms of external, internal. We are also going to disintegrate in terms of our five senses. And then we are trying to experiment what is the reality. Why do we do that? Because sometimes you have a good mood, sometimes you are really grumpy or really depressed, right? So that's why we are trying to do that. But again, this exercise is not an intellectual exercise. It's a practical exercise where you do. So you don't need to have PhD, so you don't need scriptures in this. You only need to put it in practice, right? So that's what exactly we'll do in our meditation time. So let's start doing that. Let's try to separate and inquire, sort of dissect and inquire our reality, right? So again, like I usually say, and Huilin got that habit from me, which was not good. Forget everything I said earlier, right? Nothing matters for our next meditation. So let's get ready for meditation.